it's Kendall here. New around here, welcome. Not new around here. What is up, home skillet biscuit? And it's really nice to be seated in front of the camera. It's actually been quite a little while. Complaining, you know, if you've been on the channel, you know I'm moving, It's probably gonna be in my ads today complaining because it's actually been very relevant to that entire experience as well. But we are filming in the new house. This is a moving box that I've now used like 4 times. At one point it was plushies. Now it is rogue hangers. We're getting along, we're getting there, but it's just really nice and reorienting to be able to film. So really excited. Especially because today, girl, we talking about Worst Ex Ever season 2? Season 2. It's been nearly 2 years since I talked about Worst Blank Ever. There's Worst Roommate Ever, which has 2 seasons, and then there's Worst Ex Ever, which is now on its 2nd season. But personally, I like to call the series Cops. Don't call us unless you're already dead. So when I heard that there was a new season of Worst Ex Ever, I was prepared mentally and emotionally to be very angry and to lose all hope in humanity, most likely at the same time. And rest assured, this season does exactly that. It saddens, it frustrates, it confuses. For those of you that haven't seen my other videos or haven't seen the other seasons, I will link those videos down below and also give you a warning that virtually all of these stories have to do with some type of DV. It's a true crime in many ways documentary talking about how relationships can go really bad. And also, if they do go really bad, it can go worse because, hey, have you considered? So if that's something that's pretty uncomfortable for you, I think you should probably skip this one. I try to make things a bit more digestible in the course of this commentary / recap, but you know, come on, you know yourself. You know what you can handle. I viewer discretion. Okay. So this season, much like last season, is in 4 parts, and each episode is focusing on an experience in which someone was in a terrible romantic relationship that would only get worse as time went on. And 9 times out of 10, if police had done anything, taking their stories a bit more seriously, maybe something could have been done. I will say that it's less hopeless as the first season. The first season was really damn. There's nowhere to run to, baby. Nowhere to hide. There is like one episode where someone is like actually doing their job. But one of the things that I think draws people's attention to this new season is because the first episode is a very popular murder. I hate to call it that, but people know what happened. But this season has everything. Murderers who people think are simply too hot to be murderers. Y'all been dumb since the dawn of time. Y'all been dumb since Ted Bundy. Y'all was dumb before that. Richard Ramirez had no teeth and y'all was still losing y'all shit and apparently smelt terrible, and y'all were still wetting them benches in the fucking courtroom. You hoes disgust me. There's a man that abused a bunch of women but still ended up on 90 Day Fiancé, a woman that I like to call the nut bitch with 9 lives, and more. So today we will sit, get mad, and talk about everything that is Worst Ex Ever. But first, let's send it over to ad roll Kenny, because I'm building a deck. Every time I see you, I'm complaining about something, aren't I? Building a deck, not happy about it. Very expensive. Please watch this ad. Hello everyone, this is Ad Roll Kenny, and today's video is sponsored by Factor. For those of you who have been listening to me complain for the last few videos, I am in the process of moving / moved, kind of like in a weird in-between right now. And there was a point in my new place that I did not have but a microwave and Factor meals that came to my doorstep like a magic boon from the frustrated, hungry heavens. Factor delivers chef-curated, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals straight to your door so that you can eat well this summer without spending all of your time in the kitchen, especially when you literally couldn't and you need it as a lifeline. I've always enjoyed them because they're great for busy people and just people that don't feel like cooking, but especially during moving because I didn't have pots, I didn't have pans, I didn't have ingredients to cook, I didn't have knives to cut up anything, but I was still able to get chimichurri mignon in my mouth within 2 minutes.
The young lady wants a filet mignon.
It was really good. It reminded me that you can have citrus with red meat. It's a thing that I forget about, but it's actually so good. It's so much quicker than ordering out. Because they have so many different choices, you're sure to find something that fits your taste buds / your goals, whether that be higher protein, more fiber, more veggies. And if you head over to factor75.com or click on the link down below and use code KennieFB50, you can get 50% off your first Factor box plus free breakfast for 1 year. KennieFB50 at factor75.com for 50% off plus free breakfast for 1 year. Big thanks again to Factor for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get on to the debauchery. The first episode that's probably going to bring a lot of people's attention to this show if you hadn't seen any of the other seasons is that the first episode is focused on Wade Wilson. There is nothing that irks me more than people who think so-and-so is too attractive to be a monster. There is nothing more frustrating to me because what the fuck does a monster look like? Seriously, he's a white man. He's a man. Living the fuck. It is about Wade Wilson and you hoes that write him letters because for some reason you think he's too hot to be a double murderer or serial abuser, or even worse, you think he is those things, but it doesn't matter because he's too hot for it to matter. You bitches fucking embarrass me. Now, I was already aware of Wade Wilson and the case and the embarrassment all around that. But I will say that this episode was the first media I had viewed that had interviews with Wade Wilson's exes. And that I think does a good job of taking away a bit of that sensationalization. Like, oh my God, he's so hot. What do you mean he ran over a woman until she, quote, looked like spaghetti? It actually has interviews with his exes. They give the stories of how horrible he was to them. And I think it does a good job of focusing on that while also acknowledging the slap in the face that the public's response to him was to those people. There's also, I didn't think this case could be any more frustrating, but there's also clips of the interrogation footage of Wade Wilson and basically how the police virtually said the same. You don't look like a murderer to me. And sure, we hear all the time about police officers dropping the ball, especially when it comes to a white man. They are infinitely more likely, especially if you come off a certain way, to believe that your accuser is lying. But it's another thing entirely to watch the clip of them like buddying. He was called in here for domestic abuse. And at the end of it, he's like, hey, if you got anybody that needs a personal trainer. So episode 1, dating the Deadpool killer. For better or worse, the opening episode again is about Wade Wilson. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to describe what Wade Wilson looks like because unfortunately that has a lot to do with how he's perceived or not perceived, because he is a 6'5" muscular white man who's conventionally attractive, has dimples and a nice smile. Everyone knows this, and more importantly, so does he. And not only does he know this, he knows that being those things 9 times out of 10 will be an advantage to him, one that he is more than willing to abuse in every direction. And that's before he became a fucking double murderer. So, But because of his looks, as we'll find out, that has created him a sort of a cult of personality, a fan base of bitches who don't care, who send him letters, send him money, call him, plead his innocence, sign petitions to get him out freely, even though that he admitted that he did the shit that he did. And also by the end, he was getting fucking swastikas tattooed on his face. But no, these bitches too horny on Maine. Every bitch is on Emerald Fennel time and think this nigga is Heathcliff, instead of realizing that Heathcliff is fucking abusive. Sensationalized, hypersexualized bullshit that people put onto him as if he's an anti-hero, as if he didn't murder 2 women in cold blood and beat several others to within an inch of their life. They start with Kelly, who seems to be quite a shy woman, and she would meet Steven on Tinder. Note, the name is different. He was lying. She'll find that out later. Anyway, early on, she was very impressed, particularly that he wasn't a catfish, that they connected very quickly, that he asked to kiss her. He would tell her that he was adopted by a wealthy family, that he had gotten closer to his biological father once he turned 18. And just overall, as things go, they were going well in the beginning, but they were also moving quite quickly. Very quickly. They would move in together within a month. And that is not usually a good sign, but things would get strange. Or I should say things would go missing. She would find her laptop missing and come to find out he had pawned That's crazy. That's absolutely wild. That's bonkers. Okay, we just getting started. Okay. She would ask him about it, say, hey, where the fuck is my laptop? And she would find out that he had pawned it. And so she would call the police and say, hey, this nigga pawned my shit. That is when she would find out that his name was Wade, not Steven. But one of the things that Wade was known for is really laying it on thick. He was a crier. He was a pleader. He was a baby, please type nigga. Just seeing this beautiful 6'5" man crumble in your arms, that would make many a woman forgive him often. He was horribly manipulative, and again, he was aware of the benefits he got looking the way that he did. That wouldn't stop him from doing more weird shit though, like stealing some rare Mastiff puppies and trying to sell them on Facebook, only for the breeder to find the posts of him trying to sell his stolen puppies and call the police. Wade would ask Kelly to tell the police that she stole the dogs, and if she didn't, he will kill her dogs. That escalated so quickly. Up until this point, there's been no physical violence. He stole her shit and he's stealing more shit. That's bad enough. That's plenty. But to go from that to threatening to kill my dog seems like quite a leap. Come to find out, Wade wanted her to do it because he had a criminal record already, and she doesn't. Pardon? This is where we find out that he'd been to jail for petty things over the years. And so instead, she decided to go in on his behalf, or instead of him, I should say, and she was in jail for 27 hours. But when she got out of jail, he was gone with his shit, her gun, and leaves a video of him cheating on her by making out with her friend in their fucking doorbell camera. So that was fun. By this time, Kelly would find out that Wade was a felon. So she would promptly call the police saying, hey, there's a fucking felon that stole a handgun from me. But when they found out where he went, he was already out of the state. He was now off to Texas. And because of jurisdictions and whatnot, he was now Texas's problem. They couldn't do anything unless he came back to where Kelly was, which was Florida. Eventually, he would baby please his way back to Florida about 3 weeks later. And she was like, perfect. Revenge. And so she said, hey, yo, I know you got a warrant for him. If I can get him to come to Florida, can y'all come get him? And they're like, sure. You're doing our job for us? Yeah. Alternative title for the show, Cops. We'll do the job if you do it first. She would pick him up at a bus stop. And during this conversation, he would just casually start telling her that he started doing cocaine. He would freak out during this drive, manically trying to pull a pen apart so that he could use it as a crack pipe? Nigga, crack? But anyway, they would get him once she brought him to the house. And for 4 days, he would be crying again, begging, baby, please. And eventually he would break down her walls until she would bail him out. And it was very much so one of those, bitch, no, horror movie moments where you're like, no, bitch, she gonna be mad. He gonna be mad as fuck. Like, I wouldn't do that. And he crazy even without doing anything. So, bitch, ugh. Okay. It was so hard to see because, of course, these relationships are so difficult to get out of. And so, like, it broke my heart. But I'm like, bitch, no. Oh, Lord Jesus. But I will give her this. She would not let him back in her house. Instead, she suggested that he goes to rehab. This is where we would find out that he was actually talking to another woman. Nigga, that's the least of the issues. Yes, he was cheating on her. He was talking to a woman named Courtney, and Courtney lived in the Keys. She fell in love with him very quickly, as this tends to happen, thinking he was too good to be true. But soon she would see Kelly interacting with him on his socials, and he would lie to Courtney saying Kelly was just his roommate. But when it was time for him to go to rehab, he would tell Kelly he had this friend in the Keys that could get him into rehab. But spoiler, he didn't go to rehab at all. He just went to the Keys to be a menace to Courtney. So Courtney let him move in. Why does this happen so often? Why do y'all want strange niggas moving into y'all house all willy-nilly? You don't know him. He just pretty, baby. What the fuck? Please stop moving niggas into y'all house that y'all just met. Oh my God. Anyway, before he could make his way to the Keys, he would be sure to terrorize Kelly more as well before he made his way over, especially as she was getting more and more aware of his temper and how dangerous he was. He would nearly run her over with her own car. He would strangle her, threatened to stab her, punch her, bite her, essayed her, and then would drive to the Keys where Courtney was there to meet them, with Kelly bound and gagged laying on the floor of the car on the drive to the Keys. Courtney didn't see Kelly's wounds, and Wade seemed to be behaving normally, so he just left off with Courtney, and Kelly just left the Keys battered and bruised and went home. Well, no. Kelly would actually drive to her mother's house, and upon seeing her, they would call the police immediately. As we know from this show, doing the right thing, quote unquote, whatever that means in a situation like this, lends variable results. And this is easily the most difficult part to watch of this show, because again, it's one thing to hear about police dropping the ball. It's another thing to have police bring in Wade about him beating and sexually assaulting Kelly, only to watch Wade be able to simply say, nah, only for the cop to be like, yeah, sounds good enough for me. Shit, at the end, they was pretty buddy. Ace, boom, give him a pound. Fuck ass niggas, the lot of them. And this is the shit that keeps victims from reporting, because imagine you've just been assaulted. First of all, many people don't have to imagine. Let me just put that out there. It happens all the fucking time. But you just been assaulted. You're already fucking traumatized. You go to the place that you're supposedly supposed to go to. You find out that they find your abuser. And not only do they not do anything about it, they dap that nigga up and get his name for personal fucking physical training at the end of it. I would blow the fucking station up. Fuck them. They also took a DNA swab from Wade, which is arguably almost worse, because if they hadn't taken it, that's one thing. But they took a DNA swab from Wade only to not process it at all. And then when she had her claims against him and wanting to present him as a rapist, they said, well, we can't do anything. There's no evidence. Then people will tell me shit like this and be like, well, violence isn't the answer. I disagree. Because you telling me our problems wouldn't be solved if someone pushed Wade off of a bridge? I don't know. I think we would have solved a lot of shit. Just for the sake of legality, that is me saying that in jest. Eventually, Wade would ghost Courtney and start terrorizing another person, this time a man named Christopher, who was working at the same carnival as him. Wade was working at a pizza stand, and pretty quickly, he would weasel his way into living in Chris's RV with him. Basically, Chris was like, hey, he was working there, I thought he was really cute, and then he would just come over a lot, and then within a week, this nigga's living with him! There is no one pretty enough. No one pretty enough to make them a roommate. I don't give a fuck. This is not victim blaming, by the way. This is not a victim blaming statement. I'm going to be very clear. Wade shouldn't be a dangerous psychopath regardless, but I'm more so saying, reminding people, please keep your space sacred as much as you can, especially when you ain't known that nigga for a month. You ain't known this nigga for a year, like a little time, at least a little bit. Come on now. Anyway, things were good, as they usually are in the beginning, but then one night he would get really high on something. And in a drugged up frenzy, Wade would wake up Christopher with a knife in his face, and they would just start brawling for hours. Christopher got very injured. He was bleeding. Eventually, Wade would run out, and Christopher was able to just lock the door. And he didn't call the police because he was like, they not worth calling. And I can't even blame him for thinking that. And then he just went to sleep under the kitchen table. Eventually, Wade would come back, and he would cry, and he would plead, and he would say how wrong he was. Baby, please. And Christopher would take him back. But they would end for good when Wade was going around telling people that they weren't seeing each other romantically or sexually or anything. He was saying they were cousins. Doesn't matter what the final straw is. No, but the final straw is often something that is less consequential than the original issue. Kelly would end up hearing from a friend of a friend or whatever that Wade was dating Christopher, and she would reach out to him and warn him about the type of person Wade is. She would also go online, particularly on TikTok, and talk about her story with Wade as well. And I remember this shit because her videos were showing up on my TikTok page, but particularly because other people were essentially saying she was too unattractive to have been assaulted by a beautiful Adonis like Wade. And I hope you niggas got a shit out of pine cone. Fuck y'all. Absolutely vile fucking behavior, you stupid bitches. Fuck, I hate the internet. God damn it. Christopher would tell the story of the abuse that Wade gave him. Kelly would tell her story as well to him. And then eventually Wade's biological father would reach out to Kelly as well and tell her, do not go back to him. And it seems like that happening was what really solidified her decision to never go back. Again, what the final straw is, I guess it doesn't matter just as long as there is one. Wade would keep going. He'd end up meeting a girl named Mila and was already abusing her from the jump. Eventually, police would be called on Wade because he had attacked her in a parking lot in front of her spa in broad daylight. He had stolen her car the night before while they were out at a club, which he used to pick up another woman and drive off. But when she would see him the next morning, he was in a completely different car. Eventually, after he would ride off from abusing Mila, he would be stopped at a Joe's Crab Shack, which, side note, forgot that existed. Bring back Joe's Crab Shack to Michigan. They don't have them here anymore. I assume they weren't very popular. That's why they got rid of them. But like, have you considered how I feel? Anyway, it was good. I only had them like twice because we were broke. But like, I'm an adult now. I want a crab leg. Anyway, so the police would find him at a Joe's Crab Shack and they would pull him over to question him about assaulting Mila, only for him to just drive off. He would drive off, stop the car in some parking lot of, I guess, like a friend of a friend, and basically ranting about how he did something bad and he needs to disappear, essentially. He would eventually leave there, fleeing on foot. And this is where we would find out that the car that he left was actually belonging to a woman named Christy. Christy was the woman that he met the same night that he was out with Mila, his girlfriend. He went out with Mila, left her at the club, left with another woman. And that other woman was Christy. Christy left with him, her friend, Stephanie, I think is her name, and another man. And they all left in Mila's car. We will soon find out that Christy was murdered by Wade. He would kill her at her own home, choking her to death after her friend and the other guy had gone. The next morning, still on the high of murdering someone, he would then go after a random woman he saw on the street walking to work, a woman named Diane. He would ask her for directions. She would get in the car to show him, and he would strangle her as well, and then run over her body multiple times, defile her body, sexually assault her body, and dispose of her in a vacant field. All of these murders are horrible. Awful. A random killing in general is always particularly harrowing, for me at least, because it's like, there's no reason to have killed Christy either, of course. But what I'm saying is like, you knew this woman not at all. What the fuck? She was a teacher of some sort. You know, she was a mother. She had oh my God. She had a whole life. And one day she was minding her own business and some fuckhead came and said, well, I kind of like murdering. I think I'm going to keep murdering. Fuckhead. And then on top of that, you got you horny, stupid, goat-eyed bitches. Sorry. Within 9 hours of Wade being on the run from when he was stopped by police for abusing Mila, Wade's biological father would come in clutch and he would tell police that Wade had broken into a random house, and luckily the family that lived there had left the night before to go to Ohio. Being that the house was empty, he helped himself to food, drinks, clothes, internet. Wade later would say, oh, if they were in there, I would have killed everybody inside.
What would have happened when you went in that fucking house?
Oh, everybody.
Right.
Everybody.
The biological father would find out about the 2 murders that he did because Wade would call to tell him about them. He thought it was funny. He wanted to gloat to somebody. The dad immediately called the cops on him, told them where he was. Again, cops get there when you do the job for them, I guess. I don't know. As if that weren't bad enough. That horrible, vile disregard and destruction of innocent human life. Here comes you Ash Trevino bitches talking about, hey, I can change him with my pussy. I don't think he did that. He too cute. I hate you hoes with a fervor, a fire, a flame that rages hotter than 1,000 suns. They play his fucking sexting conversation of you desperate bitches calling in to talk to him. He's like, yeah, apparently I'm like one of the most desirable inmates. Like, it's crazy. And you stupid bitches on the oh my God, is that true, baby? Bitches giving him money, making GoFundMes, putting money on his fucking books for killing 2 women. and abusing who knows how many. We only talking about the ones that we know about today. And a man, nobody's safe. Nobody's safe. What a fucking slap in the face. I hate you bitches. That combined with the testimonies of the family and friends of these people who have to live without their loved ones fucking broke my heart. Thankfully, he was found guilty and he received the death sentence, though he hasn't been sentenced to death yet. It usually takes quite a while.
If the Palm Beach County sheriffs had done their job, these two women would probably still be here.
Damn right. So Kelly would actually file a complaint with Palm Beach Sheriff's Office for not thoroughly reviewing her assault case, because if they had, he would be in jail. He would not have been able to kill two women. And what they did for that is they found that, the officer didn't do the right thing. And so they suspended him for 2 weeks. And he still works there. Justice. Episode 2, Primetime Predator. The second episode is quite timely, as it is about a horrible abuser that would somehow end up on reality television. It does seem that casters for reality TV shows have been particularly negligent, if not downright sadistic in the last few years. Has anyone noticed that? For those of you that have followed my channel for a while, I used to do a lot more videos on like Love is Blind, but something around, what season was that with the alleged pedophile, where I was like, there's a lot of smoke around here. I feel like y'all not vetting anybody, or even worse, you're picking specifically people who are concerning to bind themselves to a person for a year minimum legally as married. Speaking of which, not related, but related kinda, I just found out that a contestant from Love is Blind Argentina was found guilty of attempted murder for trying to kill his wife that he met on the show. I do get the sense that I was onto something when I said something's weird about Love is Blind these days. But today we're talking about TLC, also dumpster fire, particularly the 90 Day Fiancé thing, because we're going to be talking about a man named Jeffrey. He was cast on 90 Day Fiancé before the 90 days, I believe, the version he was on, while having a rap sheet miles long, many of which in relation to DV. Yay. Great. We start off with a woman named Christy who would meet Jeffrey on a dating app. He was very impressive. He owned properties, was working as an actor. He was nice looking. He had 2 small children with his ex-wife, but there was also, for some reason, 2 teenagers that he would babysit for a friend pretty often. They would kind of come and go. It was a little weird. Come to find out though, he was hiding a bunch of shit. He lied about his last name. Lied about how many ex-wives he had. Come to find out the 2 teenagers were his from his second marriage. He had a bunch of court cases around DV, driving while intoxicated, drug possession, neglect/abuse of his children. He had been married 4 times, the first ending in annulment and the next 3 in divorce. The 2 teens were from his second marriage with a woman named Sabrina, and they actually bring her on to chat as well, which was quite nice. Again, to get that first person account. When Kristen would find out about all these marriages, she would confront him and he would say, "You never asked." Nigga, what? You didn't ask me if I had 4 wives and if, I had more kids than I told you about, or that my last name was actually my last name. So how was I supposed to tell you? Eventually he would say, "Don't listen to all that. That's my exes conspiring against me because they haters or whatever." Speaking of the second wife, Sabrina, they bring her on to talk. And they met in the mid-90s at a Halloween party and would be married in about a year. And according to her, there weren't really any signs of him being violent, except for one time he would push her once before they were married. But she would say, "Oh, that's probably just a one-time thing. I'm going to look over it because I love him," which I know is kind of considered a cliche in these type of stories, because I feel like a lot of people disregard victims when they're like, "I love them." But I really need people to understand, like, that often is the most rational and irrational way for someone to react to shit like this. And I think if we account for that, there's space to be more empathetic. I do struggle because, again, in that kind of horror movie way, it's like, no, but love isn't rational. Neither is making sense of abuse. So she was locked in for a bit. But after they got married, he was pretty verbally and physically abusive, and that started pretty early on. He abused her while she was pregnant, isolated her, shut off her phone. She had no vehicle, no money. She wanted to stick it out because she was blaming herself, like things aren't going right because of something I'm doing. She came from families that didn't divorce, so that was also something that she was considering. She's like, oh, well, my mother stuck out marriage and my grandmother stuck out marriage, and you know, that's what you do. You stick it out. You work on things. And so she felt like that's what she had to do. Around this time, he was also on cocaine. I think we should have known that a little earlier, but he was on cocaine and was dealing it around their children through the house. Eventually, he'd be sent to prison for 30 months for having 5 pounds of weed and some cocaine. That's a lot of fucking weed. Again, I assume he was distributing, but whoa, that's a lot of fucking weed. But while in jail, he would write her and the children a bunch of letters saying his baby pleases, and I'm sorry, I'll be a better husband, I'll be a better father. And so eventually he would get out in 2 years, and she was ready to accept him, thinking that perhaps that time in jail had really changed him for the better. Lo and behold, it had not. He abused her worse than he ever had before. Her theory is that he got better at being sneakier in jail. He learned from other inmates how to abuse more effectively. But eventually, after 8 years of marriage, she would file for divorce, only to find that he beat her to it. And you know it was over because she was like, that's great. I don't have an ego thing. Because some people would be like, you beat me to it. No, she was done. She was like, that's fine, go away. But of course, that didn't stop him from trying to use their children as pawns to manipulate her. But over the years, he would marry other women, and Sabrina would pray for them, hoping they could get away from him safely.
I prayed for them every night that they would wake up and be okay, because I knew Jeffrey wasn't going to stop.
In 2018, while with Kristen, Jeffrey's youngest child that he had with the fourth wife would pass away. And at first I was like, what did that nigga do? But apparently it was completely unrelated. It was a tragic event that weirdly would bring him and Kristen closer together. But this would also be what would kind of cause him to delve into deeper depression, more violent, explosive, and volatile rages. And if she had a problem with it, he would basically say that she was being just as dramatic as all his exes were. I don't know. If all your exes have the same problems with you, I think it's time to look inward, my guy. At minimum. Eventually, his violence would get more and more aggressive. He would start breaking chairs, tearing her purse apart, then eventually choking her, locking her inside the gates of his home, stealing her phone when she was trying to call the police. And if she would block him or leave, he would call her abusive for not taking his call. Or he would send his 3-year-old over to knock on the door, screaming, "Mommy, mommy," after the death of his little brother. There is something so fucking disgusting about using children to do this shit. Like, But eventually, they got engaged. No one around them were happy about it because everyone knew something was wrong. Maybe they didn't know to what extent, but they knew something was wrong. She had lost a lot of weight, had been isolated by him. She looked rough. She looked unhappy. But within 3 months of the engagement, she would be beaten severely. The worst that he had ever beaten her. It was sudden. It was without provocation. There was no argument. There was no escalation. She came home from walking the dog and he beat her to within an inch of her life. They go more into the specifics in the documentary, but for our purposes, just know it was really, really bad. Fucking terrible. She was eventually able to escape and make her way to a neighbor's home where they called the police and paramedics. They would bring her to the hospital and confirm that she was concussed. And meanwhile, police would go over to Jeffrey's home where he was wired up on something. The police hypothesized maybe cocaine, maybe methamphetamine, something. He was hopped up on a stimulant, particularly, talking a million miles a minute, claiming that the scratches on his body was evidence of her being the aggressor instead of just defense wounds, when she had bruises, scratches, knots, bumps, blood on every part of her body. He claims that she got upset because he wanted to leave her, started banging her own body against the wall, scratching him and hitting herself. Luckily, police make the reasonable conclusion that he was the aggressor here. So they arrest him and he goes apeshit. horse kicking the squad car. So they had to restrain him by his feet and his hands. He was clearly a very agitated and violent man. That did not stop him from being able to be bailed out the next day, though. Yay! The system works perfectly and at all times. But she was able to get a restraining order against him. And there was also charges put towards him for aggravated kidnapping, DV, and interference with an emergency call. Now, the state offered him 4 years probation for nearly beating this woman to death. If she had gone to sleep that night instead of gone to the hospital, she would be dead. She was concussed. They gave him 4 years probation if he pled guilty, claiming, supposedly, that this is for the benefit of the victim so that they don't have to, be dragged into court and relive this. And sure, I'm sure there's some victims that makes sense. If it were me, I wouldn't be happy to know that you beat me within an inch of my life and now you just walking around not behind bars at all. You just out there on probation. The fuck? Regardless, Jeffrey would deny that. He did not want to plead guilty and instead wanted it to go to trial so that he can speak to the jury to let them know that this is all a lie. He did not harm Kristen. So it took a while for the trial to happen because of COVID. And in that time between the allegations and the trial, he would be cast for 90 Day Fiancé before the 90 days. For those of you who aren't reality TV trash like I am, 90 Day Fiancé and all of its various spin-offs ultimately follow an American and a foreigner in their relationship as they try to figure out how they're going to go forth with their relationship, whether they're coming to the United States and they're getting married, or the American is going to the other person's country of origin, or somewhere in between. And come to find out, in the midst of him proposing to Kristen and horribly abusing her, he was also cheating on her with a Russian woman named Vara. Because her assault happened most likely after he was already cast for the show, they didn't know that. So that's fair. But if you recall, he had numerous assault charges and various criminal charges before that. There is no way that they didn't know something about his concerning behavior. Either A, it was gross negligence, you didn't look into his background at all, or B, you did, and you didn't give a fuck. And not only that, people say before the show comes out, hey, you see all this shit is very easy for us to find. I don't know why it was so hard for you to find it. They still air the episodes.
I'm Jeffrey, I'm 41 years old, and I live just outside of Knoxville, Tennessee.
They don't edit him out. It sounded like, oh, nigga, that was on Love is Blind. He was like, well, I'm not the police. Nigga, what? They aired the episodes anyway. Presented him as likable, an all-American country boy that had just been struggling, unlucky, in love, that he'd been hurt by so many women. He made fans, got even more popular. But my favorite thing about people like this is that they always do very lawyerless behavior. Primarily being that because he's a fucking idiot, he was talking about the case all over the internet. Rule number 1. You have an ongoing investigation, an ongoing case, you shut the fuck up. But it seems that either he didn't have a lawyer in the beginning or he just didn't listen to them because he was going everywhere to plead his case. I'm not this, I'm not that, they're lying. The trial would happen. Of course, Kristen would go up to the stand, present the events that had happened to her. She was very credible. She was very believable. And for some reason, most likely just the sheer narcissism of it, Joffrey thought it was Joffrey, whatever, thought it was a good idea for him to take the stand, where he presented that all of this was because she was drunk and upset that he was leaving her and that all these wounds were self-inflicted. That nigga was found guilty. And the best part of all of this is the sentencing. Because during the trial itself, they're not able to bring in other circumstances in which he's been accused of being abusive. But for sentencing, they can. So they would bring in his third wife, who would tell the stories of how he abused her as well, stalked her, essayed her. And now we have several women saying that there is a history of him doing like violence to the women that are in his life. He would also plead to the court, basically saying like, people like me, and he cries and he's like, I'm so loved and blah, 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 and so many people like me. Like, why would you, like, I'm not a bad guy. Luckily, the judge saw right through it, could tell that he's a terrible person. And he would say, you get 18 years, which apparently was 2 years more than the state was even asking for. He probably would have got 16 if he would have just shut the fuck up and didn't go on the stand. But now he's getting 18. He will be there until 2040, and the Russian woman he was with is still at his side the entire time. She was made a permanent resident in 2021. She stays at his home, takes care of his dogs. Honestly, she's in the best place for all of this. I kind of wish she would just shut the fuck up and live in his house for free, essentially. You got residency, cute doggies, and you don't have to deal with the abusive dude for 18 years. Girl, count your blessings. Marry another nigga and move him in there. Hope he die in there. Girl, that's awesome. Anyway, Kristen, though, would rekindle her relationship with a college boyfriend in 2019. And she says she's very happy now. She's married with that person who was the love of her life, which is very cute because it was like, oh, they broke up in college because they were just going different places. It's that time of your life, you know, blah, blah, blah. But now that they're back together, she said, you know, that was a very dark time in her life being with Joffrey, but overall, she's very happy. And that's good to hear. Yay. Episode 3, A Fatal Attraction, aka the nut bitch with 9 lives, as I've called it to everyone that texts me about it. This is about a woman named Joyce who would not stop. And at some point, I was like, damn, why is it that evil people seem to have so much resilience? Like, why are they built for it tough like that shit? It opens with a woman named Katie. And Katie would talk about her ex, Joyce. They would meet on Facebook. They started chatting and had a lot in common. They both worked in healthcare, which is really horrifying when you think about a person like Joyce in particular working in healthcare. Ooh. Joyce said that she was legally married, but was separated from her wife, and that wife's name was Rosalind. She said that she wasn't in contact with Rosalind. They are separated. They are essentially divorcing. And so Joyce and Katie would have their relationship. Everything was going very well in the beginning, as it often does. Joyce was generous, made quite a lot of money because she was also running a hydrocolonic clinic. She was a snazzy dresser. Everything seemed really good in the beginning. Well, 2 months into dating, they get to talking about how one of Joyce's ex-girlfriends had gone missing. How does this come up in casual conversation? Joyce would cry, be very overwhelmed by it, but seemed to move on suspiciously quickly. She just cried and was like, all right, you want to watch Bones? But eventually it would be something that would come up again and again and again. Apparently this ex had gone missing 5 years prior, and the police were contacting Joyce thinking she had some information about it. Katie would eventually find out that this woman that had gone missing, her name was Shondell. So this would make her go online and start to look up the Shondell missing person case. There was quite a bit of news coverage about it, and the thing that struck her most was Shondell's mom doing an interview, and that got me too. It got me misty. The mom basically says that she goes to her window and she just looks out of it, just hoping that her daughter comes home. That shit broke me. It's kind of breaking me right now. Oh man, just like, man. There would be a detective assigned to the case. His name was Detective Guest, Henry Guest. Shondell had been presumed missing after she didn't show up to work one morning. Her coworkers found that strange. She didn't suddenly, without saying anything, miss work. She also didn't make it to a dinner at her mother's home, which is odd for her not to do, especially not to call. She didn't answer the phone. She just disappeared. Katie would look up Joyce's name in accordance with the case and would find that she was actually named as a primary person of interest in her disappearance. But Katie was in love with her, and so she wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. According to Joyce, the story was that Joyce had purchased a home for Shondell and her to live in, but Shondell had better credit, so the house was made in her name, and Joyce would pay for everything, pay for the remodel, make it pretty, but suddenly, for no reason, Shondell broke up with her and kicked her out of the house. And being that she wasn't on the deed of the house, she could do that. In the grand scheme of things, this is the least egregious thing that Joyce would do. But it seems part of their breakup, Joyce and Shondell, was Shondell finding out that Joyce was cheating on her with her wife, Joyce's wife, Rosalind. So come to find out, Joyce was already married and had a girlfriend named Shondell. Shondell found out about the wife and she kicked her out of the house. So Joyce will go around stalking not just Shondell, but also her friends, accosting them, trying to get them to make Shondell talk to her. And apparently her behavior was getting more and more concerning until one day Shondell would get a gun and tell her loved ones that if something happened to her, it was Shondell. She would get a protection order against Joyce. And as y'all know, that always stops all murders. Eventually, Joyce would be brought in for questioning about Shondell's disappearance. And she would just simply say that she wasn't missing. She was tired of her family and decided to cut ties and go back to her home country. Detective Guess would find that odd. Having met her family, they seemed very close, and that seemed like something that would be unlike her in this dynamic. And there was always signs that Joyce was the person that had something to do with her disappearance, but they didn't have any solid evidence, so they couldn't do anything. Detective Guest would always say that that disappearance was always in the back of his mind. And so years would pass, 5 or so years, until the events of the story. But Katie doesn't know all of this yet, but she would start to ask questions about Shondell to Joyce, and she would get very defensive about it. But as long as that wasn't their conversation, things were fine. But eventually things would get progressively more agitated until one day, Katie would go to tell Joyce that she was leaving to the grocery store while Joyce was in the shower. Joyce would then run out butt naked out of the shower to stop Katie from going to the store. She would bang her against the wall and threaten her with a kitchen knife, and then let her go, grab her in for a hug and say, you know, I love you, I wouldn't hurt you, and then acted like it didn't happen. And rest assured, this will be only one of the many times this bitch would do some weird, wild shit and then go back like nothing happened. One day, she would confess to Katie that she killed Shondell. She would tell her the whole story, how it happened, what she did to lead up to it. Basically, she hired a hitman to kidnap Shondell for a couple of days, which, complete side note, where the fuck are you hiring a hitman? Is there a Craigslist for that? They got Yelp reviews. But anyway, she got a hitman to kidnap her on her way to work. And then they would bring her to the woods, tase her, and bury her alive. She would tell the story to Katie, wipe her tears, and go back to watching TV. Somebody needs to put her down like old Yella. I do believe that some people are too far gone. I think this is evidence of that. So reasonably, Katie's like, I need to get the fuck out of here, but I don't want to anger her because this nut bitch kills people. Eventually, she would be able to like maneuver gradually out of things without setting her off. Katie would be reached out to by Detective Guess, and she told him everything that Joyce had said about Shondell's murder. And so Guess asked her to stay in contact as much as she could with Joyce, as much as she felt safe, as much as she felt comfortable, so that they can get more information out of her. My thing is, what more information do you niggas need? She said she killed her, but he wanted her to get a recording if possible. Again, cops. We'll do the job if you've done it already. Then we meet Rosalind's sister, the wife's sister. She wasn't a fan of Joyce from the get-go. She doesn't really go much into it, but she just says, I could tell from the jump, wasn't a fan. And that was only worsened by Rosalind telling her that Joyce eventually started cheating on her. But eventually, Joyce and Rosalind would be together for years and get married. By the time everything fell apart with their relationship, they were together for 14 years. Eventually, over time, things had gotten worse and worse and worse. Specifics of how things got worse aren't really known because Rosalind would keep their relationship very close to the chest. But it was clear that things were getting very bad at some point, and Rosalind would eventually leave Joyce, stating that she wanted a divorce. And eventually, Rosalind would move to New Orleans to take care of her father. But Joyce would not let her go. Joyce would be calling all the time, badgering her. And only then did Rosalind let her sister know that Joyce had the capacity to be dangerous. Because before this, she was like, I just don't like her, and she a cheater. But now, no, she's abusive. Katie would be on the phone with Joyce, again, trying to get more evidence of her involvement with Shondell's murder, and end up recording Joyce saying that she had purchased a gun and was planning to kill Ross and just live on the run for the rest of her life. What she was going to do is kill Ross and frame her for Shondell's murder because she was jealous of Joyce cheating on her with Shondell. Katie reached out to Ross, told her, Joyce is coming to New Orleans. She's coming to New Orleans. I need you to consider that. So Ross went to the police station immediately. Joyce came down to New Orleans, but she didn't go after Ross at first because there was a bunch of cousins at her house, and that seemed to spook her away. And eventually, Detective Guess drove down to talk to Ross, but she was just so afraid that she wouldn't say anything to him. So he simply warned her that, you know, she might be coming after you next. I don't really like this part of the documentary. As a little side note, I feel like there's some information missing here in particular, because if she went to the police before, why would she suddenly not talk to this detective about the same person? I don't know. What would end up being a very fatal mistake, Ross would agree to meet Joyce to have her sign divorce papers. Ross would tell her sister that she was going to fly there and make her sign them. And the sister was like, are you fucking insane? No, you said this bitch is crazy. You said that she has the capacity to be violent. But unfortunately, Ross would not heed the warning and would meet up with Joyce in a hotel or a motel where Joyce would stab Rosalind 34 times. When paramedics arrived, she was in and out of consciousness, enough to be able to say that her attacker was Joyce, but eventually she would succumb to her injuries. And now Joyce was on the run. Police would ping her phone, finding that she was headed to Florida, which is where Katie resided. And they would call Katie saying, hey, she coming after you next, I'm pretty sure. She was the only one that lived there, and she was the only person that knew what she had done to Shondell. Joyce would call Katie over and over and over again, but Katie would not accept the call. And police would eventually box Joyce in on the highway. Once they did, she attempted to shoot her gun out of the window. Police opened fire and hit her in the neck. And she doesn't die. Ain't that some shit? Why are evil niggas so resilient? Like, why don't y'all go down? All the kind, loving, nice people this bitch has been around didn't survive, but this nut bitch is the one with 9 lives. Hello? Where's the fucking justice? In custody, the bitch would have the nerve to try again to pin the murder of Shondell on Ross. Eventually, she would admit where Shondell's body was, but police were never able to uncover it. But they had more than enough to charge her with the murder of Shondell and Rosalind because of Katie's recordings. She would take a guilty plea for Roz's murder, which would get her life with the possibility of parole. But eventually, with a follow-up trial, he would get Katie to testify against Joyce in the murder of Shondell, and she would be found guilty for that, for which she was given life without possibility of parole. A small consolation prize to have her not have the possibility of getting out. But at the end of the day, that woman ruined so many lives. 2 Black queer women are dead because of this nut bitch. And I guess as a small consolation prize, there was one detective kind of doing his job. That shouldn't be rare. It's fucking sad. All right, episode 4, Ride or Die. The final episode of this season focuses on an interstate kidnapping of a woman named Karen in 2006. Karen had just gotten divorced and had a new lease on life. She was financially secure, was now single, independent. She was living with her niece, Brenna, at the time, and Karen would meet a man named Scott at a bar one night, and she fell head over heels for this guy pretty much immediately. But soon into the relationship, she would actually meet a tarot card reader through a coworker friend or something. She would call just kind of out of curiosity, and the card reader would say, "Ooh, bitch, you got a doozy around you. Don't do it. Devil card, don't do it." But she ignored her because, like, what does she know? Scott would slowly move into her house, leaving things over there. Then he would start getting his mail at her home without her knowing. Talk about a combination of worst ex and worst roommate ever, bitch. He started getting mail without her knowing. And for those of you that did watch Worst Roommate Ever, you would know that once he starts getting mail there, he's kind of a resident now by law. So she can't just kick him out. So she was angry, but she just kind of dealt with it, and they were still dating. It was very weird. Again, Brenna was living there, her niece, and she would notice how scrutinizing and controlling and belittling he was. And that's before it came up that he was using steroids, which would also maybe have something to do with his level of agitation. And then quickly after that, suddenly he's talking about how Brenna is old enough to live on her own. Maybe she should move out. You know, so Brenna would move out, and honestly, that was probably more so just there were fewer witnesses for him to more effectively abuse Karen. But once Brenna was out of the house, he was revving it up. But mind you, they had only been dating for 7 months. Nigga, I've had meat in my freezer for longer than that. And this nigga came in and turned your shit upside down that quickly? Kill him! Of course, it's insane to abuse someone in general, but there's something particularly crazy about abusing a nigga that you've known less than a year after meeting each other. I know you fucking lied. She should have shot him. In Minecraft? I heard that doesn't work anymore. But luckily, she had a friend at work that would let her stay with her as she got an emergency eviction notice for him. But even after he was out of the house, he was calling her incessantly, threatening her dog, showing up at her house, stalking her. And ultimately, she didn't feel safe and asked Brenna to move back in. Did that stop him from barging in one day or calling her 27 times in a single day or breaking into the passenger side of her car, threatening her at knife point on the way to work? No. Speaking of that last one, she was able to calm him down enough to drop him off by his Jeep. And luckily, she was able to get an emergency restraining order from that behavior. But as you'll see, it only does so much. Again, I love how paper stops bullets. 2 weeks after filing that restraining order, she would be driving on the way to work and the trunk ajar light would come on. She would stop the car, go to check it, thinking that maybe she didn't close it tightly enough from the night before when she went to get groceries, only to find that nut nigga in the fucking trunk. There's something very final about death. And if you needed to put a period to his sentence, so be it. He grabs her with a knife in his hand, dressed in all black, takes her into his Jeep, where he would then drive and drive and drive. Brenna would call a few times, not having heard from Karen, which was enough to concern her, given the situation that Karen is in. And Karen was able to convince him that if she didn't talk to Brenna, it would be suspicious. So his brilliant idea was tell Brenna, you're with me, trying to talk me down from committing suicide? Why would that be less alarming? Like, what? So she says this to Brenna, and Brenna is like, if you want me to call the police, say don't call the police. And so Karen says, Brenna, don't call the police. So guess who the fuck she called? Now, being that this was 20 years ago and there was not nearly as many surveillance tools to find Karen, they were struggling. There was no smartphones, very little street cameras, if any, but they would end up being able to follow them through their credit cards in particular. If they stopped at an ATM, if they bought something via card, they can figure out where they were going. Suddenly, the documentary pivots to a woman named Kim. Kim dated Scott 15 years prior to the events of our story, and spoiler, he was a fucking nightmare to her too. When they met, he was a firefighter, but he would lose that job quite quickly. Kim would also incidentally talk to someone that read tarot cards, and they would also tell her that there's somebody crazy around you, bitch, get away. I'm seeing the devil card. He's on drugs. I mean, damn, if anything, this is an advertisement for tarot card readers. Calm me down, Miss Cleo. This person's on drugs and you need to get away from him. Funny story. She would come to find out that he was on crack cocaine, and she would talk about him getting more erratic and progressively more violent. One day, she would find his syringes that he would be using for steroids, and she would confront him about that. He would get incredibly violent. Why are people confronting him more about steroids than crack? Have you noticed that? Was crack more permissible in the mid-90s than anabolic steroids? The police were called. He threatened to kill the police himself. They pepper sprayed him and arrested him, and that would be the end of their relationship. Kim would actually hear of the kidnapping from her brother, and she would get in contact with detectives on the case to give information about possible places that Scott may go while he's on his joyride. About 3 days into the kidnapping, they would sleep at a hotel where she would end up taking a notepad. This would be the beginning of her writing letters, all saying the same thing about how she has been kidnapped. This is her name. This is not a joke. Please contact so-and-so police. And so she would, at places they would stop, whether it be a bathroom or a restaurant, she would leave the notes in those places. And because he was going through several states on this joyride, this would soon become a federal investigation and the FBI would get involved. Eventually, Scott would call his mother, considering they were running low on cash. And again, it's always weird the things that really show up for me, but hearing him cuss out his mama over the phone because she only has $150?
That's all the fuck that you have. You better get some more. I can't do it. I'm going to have to do something to get money, okay?
Well, make things worse, Scott. Don't you know?
I have no other choice. Shut up. Just do that.
Yes, you do. Your choice, honey, is to...
Bye.
Well, calm down, Scott. You got to calm
Bye.
down.
Just do that. Bye.
I love you.
Nigga, she should have aborted you. Because what the fuck she look like getting abused by her own child? Nobody can trip him down some stairs, have him fall like Meryl Streep and death becomes her. Anyway, the FBI was able to ping this call to his mother. They were able to follow that call as well as the ATM he would go to soon after. They would find out that he got that money, bought crack. Nigga, how do you know a crack dealer in a 13-state radius? Nigga, we started in Florida. They in Mississippi. Crackhead motivation is something else, right? Imagine if he put that crackhead determination towards community building or volunteering, literacy. Lord, the police would get to them while on the highway, and they were able to box them in and able to restrain him and get Karen out safely. Scott was charged with aggravated stalking, kidnapping with a weapon, violation of an injunction against Steve V, and violation of probation. He was found guilty on all charges and was sentenced to life, which he served until his death in 2025. I feel like they could have. I don't know. I struggle because I go back and forth with like, I don't think that the state should have the right to choose who lives or dies, but I think maybe victims should. Can we go like very like Mussolini about it, string them up like a pig and just have people, not to get too anti-fascist. Anyway, and that, my friends, is all of season 2 of Worst Ex Ever. What are your thoughts? Have you seen it? Did you know about these cases beforehand? Commiserate with me how the system does not work. I don't give a fuck what they be talking about. It don't work. It very rarely does. The times it works is when people directly ignore how it's supposed to work. It feels good to be back though. I hope all the victims are able to find some peace. Hopefully the documentary in and of itself presented a form of like therapeutic working through everything. And I hope you guys enjoyed talking about this mess with me. If you like this video, feel free to like it. Follow me on all my social media, Instagram, Bluesky, both of which are KennieJD. I think me and my friend Yemi are going to talk about this as well. I'll keep you posted because I'm curious, like she's also a lawyer. So like see what her sides of things as a criminal defense attorney, like her insight on it. Maybe by the time you see this, that'll be filmed and out. We'll see. Become a member. Follow me on Twitch. I'm at NotKennieTV. I also have a VOD channel also called NotKennieTV where I put up funny edits of my Twitch VODs. And I think I'll end it with a clip right here.
Really? Wait.
Why do you have...
That was my wiener. Don't look at that.
Oh my God. Why was it so long?
Hey.
It was to your knee.
I was born this way.
Bye.